Thank you so much for the kind words, and thank you for inviting me here. I've been to a number of these in the past, and it's just an honor to be able to share. So before I really get into more about me, about Disher, about what we do, and about this title here, I want to start with a few questions, and maybe start off with a belief that I have. So the belief is that learning only comes through asking really good questions. Learning only comes through asking really good questions. So here's just a few questions for you to ponder as we get going here. First question, what do you think are the key differences between owning something and being entrusted with something? Owning something and being entrusted with something. Second, how many of you have taken responsibility, have been entrusted with something that somebody else built, a business, a role, a team, a relationship, a company, an organization? And then third, how many of you expect to hand that off to somebody else? That's all of us. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is what does it mean to not just control something, but to steward it, to be accountable to it, to lead in what you don't own. Because the fact of the matter is that the Lord is clear. He says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, which means that in the marketplace of ideas, that none of us really, even if we own our own businesses, even if we're leading in such a way, even if we're an employee owner, none of us really own it. It's all the Lord's. And so what does it mean to be a really good steward and to lead what you don't own? So that's what I want to talk through today, is just a little bit of my career journey. So here's what we're going to be talking about. Share some of my career and leadership journey with you. And then along those ways, we're going to take some stops of some of the lessons that I've had in my almost 20 years in manufacturing, product development, and leadership. So I'll just share some of those lessons along the way. And then just offer up a little bit of a taste test of this idea of being a good steward, of being somebody who can protect and grow the assets that have been entrusted to you by the Lord and by others. And so we'll spend some time doing a little taste test of what that framework looks like, and I hope that's a blessing and you can take it, pick it up, and make an impact with it. And then I'd love to end just sharing a little bit more of my own testimony as well, and how the Lord has shown up in my life. Sound good? Everybody ready? All right. So a little bit more about Disher. So how many have heard of Disher? Just sense of it in the room. Heard of Disher before? Maybe you know Jeff Disher. Some people get confused and they think like that either it's called Dyer Corp, which it's not, or that my name's Joe Disher, which it's not. We kind of joke about that. But Jeff started the business in 2000. And some of you maybe he's been a speaker here as well. He started the business in 2000. Our headquarters is in Zeeland, Michigan, so kind of near the lakeshore there. I live south of Grand Rapids, and I'll get into a little bit my connection to Kalamazoo here, but this is what we do. We deliver engineering talent and leadership services that help many, many businesses move forward. And you can see the bulk of our business, where the business was started, is in Disher Engineering, so everything in product development, from kind of napkin sketch all the way to manufacturing and automation. Disher talent recruiting, training, consulting, and then leading by design. So some of you know Roger Price here. We purchased that business from Roger. And so we're running it in much the same way that he ran it. And so we love to develop leaders. And really, we believe that West Michigan can be what Nashville is to music. We believe that West Michigan can be that to leadership. We believe we have some of the best leaders in the country. Our mission, our why, that's kind of what we do. Our mission is to make a positive difference with our customers, coworkers, and community. So you can see some of our vision and some of the things that we strive to do, but this is just a few folks from our team serving. Top pictures, Outdoor Discovery Center out in Holland, and then doing some habitat work there. So that's our why. That's why we get up every day. That's why I get up every day. And we do it in all these types of companies right here. So lots of great partners. A couple of partners in the room, I'm sure, are Stryker and Landscape Forms, perhaps. Are there any Stryker folks here today? or former Stryker folks? Well, Stryker, we all know about Stryker. So we love working with Stryker. So getting in the medical device side, we do food and bev, like I said, everything in product development, manufacturing, and get to do all kinds of cool stuff. Sense of scale, our engineering services, about 80 to 100 engineers, and working all kinds of different things there. My background was mainly technically down here in the manufacturing solution space, but involved in all parts of the business. Talent, I mentioned that before, talent and recruiting, so we do a lot of technical recruiting, and then leading by design, which I mentioned too. Okay, so I need you to hear a little bit about, a little bit more personally, my personal intro, okay? So for all of us, if we're gifted gifts from the Lord, we have skills that we want to hone over time. We also have things that we're working on. So you need to know one thing I'm working on is pride. And so I share this picture out of a sense of working on that, because I'm going to share a little bit about my wife and about just our journey a little bit. So I share this picture, and not everybody gets to see this picture, but this is something to keep me humble here. So this is my wife and I's first date. Okay, so we were 14, and we went to homecoming dance, I think it was, together. So this is us today, and so we've been together since 2001. So this is us today. She's loving my life. We are great partners together, and yeah, we've been together that whole time, never broke up or anything, so which is really cool. These are our boys, they're surfer dudes. This is Ezra and Abe. This is us out on the East Coast, one of our favorite places, and a few more pictures here. So Ezra is 13, he plays the stand-up bass. He loves golf, as you can see, and he's just an amazing guy. They go to Byron Center Public up by us, and then this is Abe. Abe is, he's a wild child, he's that second child, if you know, first child, the second child, and he's just a wild child. So they love snowboarding and wakeboarding, and I always say that my favorite joke on here is that it's clear that they got their hair from me. No, my wife did all that. So she stays home, and she's just an amazing partner, and so that's a little bit about my family. Okay, so getting into the content here. A little career intro. So this is kind of the way that we'll talk through about this idea of leading what you don't own. So I'll just share a little bit about an engineer, being a leader, some of these lessons along the way with those two stops in my career journey. And I'll talk about a little bit about a career path that was really important to my own development around this idea of stewardship of pastor, and then what I see my role as today. So we'll walk through that, and as we go down, like I said, we'll have some lessons along the way that I've learned. So even before we get into engineering and leading, as I look back on my own life, I think of how God was forming me and things I was interested in. So especially if you look at your own kids, you think back to your own life, what it looks like to what are you interested in. So I was really interested in computers and science and space and things like that. We were down in Orlando. Anybody go spring break, Florida? We were down in Orlando and saw the Artemis launch, which was super cool. So that's my world. So it was a very nerdy upbringing in that sense. And I knew I wanted to do something scientific. So before I was an engineer, before I did any of those things, first I was a Bronco. Yeah, so go Broncos. So this is my wife and I at a hockey game, which was one of our favorite things to do. Sharing here, apparently I have like it's blue shirt and blue sport blazer, I guess that's my thing. Aeronautical engineering, that was my partner up there for our aeronautical engineering senior project, and just loved my time at Western. So that's my connection. Went to Western Michigan, kind of mid-2000s, early to mid-2000s, and loved my time. So I love Kalamazoo, lived here for about 6 years or so, and so my connection is kind of all over West Michigan, but my heart does still have a place here in Kalamazoo. So yeah, a little bit about my engineering journey. So I mentioned going to Western for engineering. I did do some teaching. I love teaching. So I did do some teaching at Western as well in the engineering program. And then I got really involved in automation, machine design, things like that. And I worked for Parker Hannifin. So you guys know Parker Hannifin, right? Great company. Oh my goodness, great company. Loved my time there. I was at Seago, so I got to experience so many amazing things in manufacturing, learning about lean. But that's where I really learned that I loved working with people. I loved working with people. I know it sounds funny, but as an engineer, okay, I have to ask, any engineers in the room? Who are my engineers, okay? Yes, you know what I mean, right? When I say that, because one engineer, he's sitting way in the back. He's way in the back. You know the difference between an engineer and an accountant? Have you heard this one before? Engineer and accountant? Okay, the engineer will look at your shoes instead of, okay. At least we can talk about accountants that way. Some of you are going to be driving home and you're going to go, oh, okay, I get that. That's okay. I just learned that I loved working with people on the shop floor, loved working with people in leadership, just building these great teams together of people from all walks of life, And I loved that. And I recognized that was going to be part of my career, was not just doing the engineering, the technical work of engineering, which is fun for sure, but I knew that I wanted to work with people, and I wanted to be able to engage and work with people side by side to create something that the Lord put in us. He put in us a creativity to be able to create and hone and grow. So I knew that was going to be part of my journey, and then Parker Hannifin, amazing company. And they do all kinds of great work, as you know, all around the world. And I also knew that if I wanted to grow and to change and do different things, I would have had to move away from Kalamazoo, move away from Grand Rapids, West Michigan, and I loved it here. And so I made the difficult decision to at that time, and I'm so thankful I did, was, and we had family here and everything, but I made the decision to go to Disher, which was a great decision, and love my time at Disher because I wanted this variety of growth. And so I wanted to try different projects. We're a professional services firm, so you're always thrown into things that you have to learn. You have to learn on your feet. You have to ask really great questions, like I mentioned earlier. And I wanted that, and I wanted to work at a place that had a great culture. And so I got all of that and more. And so that's really where my leadership journey started. I was able to, at that time, work in the business on technical projects, everything like I mentioned before in automation, manufacturing, product design, but also got to work at a smaller company. We were about 50 people at the time. We're roughly 100 right now. And got to get involved in all areas of the business. So in sales and in leadership development, and that was what I wanted. I wanted to be able to learn all kinds of things. So here's one lesson from that leadership journey, because I eventually became a team leader at Disher. This is one of those lessons that I mentioned along the way. So this is Disher's leadership model. This is it's kind of based on this idea of, if you've ever read the book Virtuous Leadership, it's a little bit of a textbook to read, but kind of starting from the top to bottom, our mission to make a positive difference. If you're coming to Disher, you have to live into these priorities, these responsibilities. Growing yourself, serving customers, achieving those key measures, accountability, steward our organization, delivering project excellence. So that's kind of like, you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to live into our mission and be able to do that. But then you also have to work on our culture and what it means to live into our culture of unvarnished communication. I love that, Chad. That was great. That was a great one. I wrote that one down. But that's how we put it, is unvarnished communication. And these are really our values. And then it gets deeper into more of what do you need to be as a person? What do you need to be as a leader? Humble, have vision, care for people, decision making. So this is just something that we've developed as we think about leadership, what it means to, and how it all kind of fits together to be able to lead really well. So it's just, again, I'm just going to kind of give you some taste test things of how we lead in our organization, and then some more lessons along the way. So Another lesson that I learned along the way here, as an engineer, as a leader, was to really build from your foundation. So where's your foundation? Is it rock or is it sand? So I think a lot of us know this story of the man who builds his house upon a rock versus the man who builds his house upon sand, and when the wind and the waves came, which one stood? And so really understanding what's motivating you to build, and where are you building on? Are you putting those words into practice? Another lesson that I learned along the way of engineering and leadership is really learning about yourself. So there's lots of ways and all kinds of different spaces and places to do this. If you're at church, maybe you've heard of an APES test. Are you more of an apostle, a prophet, evangelist, shepherd, or teacher? Or maybe it's something along the lines of working genius or some of these other great DISC or things like that. You have to learn about yourself. So that's part of my philosophy along the way, engineering and leader. You have to always learn about how the Lord created you, how he created you to serve this world. And then finally, this is one I'm really passionate about, so you'll hear me talk about this a lot. Read really widely and listen really well. So what I mean by that is that, they're deeply important skills. I'm really passionate about this because I think that this unlocks a little bit of a different mindset in today's country, in today's world, is if we can listen and understand and read things that we don't agree with, especially. Read things that we don't agree with, read things and listen to things, whether it's podcasts or different news channels that we don't agree with, to understand, to try to understand. And it's not just me saying this. I pulled up a couple of scriptures. In Acts 17, Paul, he's on Mars Hill, he's in Athens, and he's talking to the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. So this is where he's there, and he's looking for brothers and sisters. But before they get there, it says he's walking around, he's looking at the temples, the objects of worship, and then he starts with that altar to an unknown God. And this is what he says. He says, I noticed that, and I want to tell you about this unknown God. And he says, one of your own philosophers says, in him we live and move and have our being. And then he says, as some of your poets said, we are his offspring. He's literally quoting from ancient Greece. One of them was Epimedes and one was Aratus. And he's saying, hey, these things are true. Those are actually true things, but you're missing, you have the substance of it, but you're missing the deep part of it. Paul read really widely. He knew the culture in which he lived in. And so it's not good enough, sorry, I know I'm preaching a little bit. It's not good enough to know your own thought patterns. You have to understand other people's thought patterns well. And the best way to do it, and I think that it's a really important thing in today's day and age, is to understand and to read things that maybe you feel a little uncomfortable with, to be able to understand it. So those are some of the lessons that I learned along my leadership journey, learning about yourself, learning those technical things. And then the Lord, he was up to something really good. At times I felt it was no good, but he was up to something. So I transitioned from a leader at Dyer to becoming a pastor. So I was the executive pastor of my church. This was one of the great honors of my life, was preaching Easter Sunday. I think that was 2021, and so I served for a couple of years as the executive pastor of my church, and it was probably less of a big pivot than what it might look on paper. I had been involved in church leadership in many ways, shapes, and forms over the years. One part of my testimony, which I'll share near the end here, is involved in the launch of the bridge. How many people know the bridge down here? So I was on the launch team of that church, and it's an amazing church. We saw God do amazing things while we were there, and even somebody that was, and it's a really close story to my heart, but even somebody that was pronounced brain dead, who was no longer brain dead, and he's doing amazing now. And so we saw the Lord do amazing miracles at that time, and his Spirit moving, and so I always had these parallel paths of church leadership, personal leadership, and I became the executive pastor of my church. So I left Disher, so this is a full-time vocation. What do you notice about that time frame, though? That time frame, that was something. I said election and COVID and masks and oh my. I mean, there was a few things in that time period. And what I would say is that the Lord knew I needed that. Wasn't perfect, made many mistakes. I'll share a couple of the lessons along the way that I picked up. But it was like a leadership pressure cooker. It was a time, if anyone was in, especially church leadership at the time, there were a lot of hard conversations. And what do? Do you do masks or no masks or whatever, right? It seems so far away, but it was a leadership pressure cooker. That's how I would put COVID. So here's some of the lessons along the way, and then we'll stop off and we'll talk through steward leadership a little bit. This is a little bit of our version of this Chad idea. I love that. I learned this along the way at church. Listen, understand, validate, and influence. And it's an easy thing to remember is lovey, okay? So the big idea here, and you can imagine that there were some conversations that sometimes got a little heated in the church at that time. And what I learned, I picked this up from one of our leaders. It was like, Joe, you have to be able to listen to people, number one. Some people have a hard time doing that. Okay, some people in your organizations probably have a hard time doing that, but really, truly listen to people, okay? In those hard conversations, you need to try to understand, so seek to understand. Some people don't make that attempt. And trying to understand is not as easy as it sounds. Trying to really understand where a person's coming from. And I don't do it perfectly, trust me. Trying to validate their concerns, so this would be, the way this would work out is okay, I hear you. I think what I hear is this, is that right? Am I understanding? And then try to grab those validating things in the conversation to say, okay, I can see where you're coming from, that you feel this way. That's a valid way to think about it, okay? Most people can't do that part either because they're entrenched. And again, I do not do this perfect. I'm preaching to myself here. But then the last part, so few people do, is try to influence. Try to influence in a positive direction. So if you still, after that conversation, feel differently from the person you're sitting across from, did you hear them? Did you understand truly? And it might take a few iterations to really understand what in their conversation is valid, and how do you influence them toward a different thought or a different position. So that was one that really was helpful during COVID. There's always something deeper going on. So this is the mental, emotional health, spiritual health conversation, and learning, being part of a church in that pastoral time. It was an amazing blessing to be able to get to know lots and lots of counselors and folks and friends that are really close friends now, and to hear the way they're trained to be able to help others. So there's always something deeper going on. The way this works out in our business is we actually have partnerships set up at Disher with some local counseling agencies. So this is even beyond I'm forgetting the acronym here, but you know how you'll have not an MEP, ERP? No, what's the word? You know how you have a connection with Pine Rest or somebody like that, where you can call a 1-800 number. EAP, thank you. Sorry, not enough coffee. EAP, thank you. You can call a 1-800 number, you get 3 sessions, right? We said that's great, we still have that, but we wanted to create personal connections with local counseling agencies that we can introduce our teammates to if they have an issue. So our team knows this at Disher, that we have 2 or 3 different partnerships. We negotiated directly with them for a reduced rate. Some of them take insurance, some don't. I won't get into why that is. But it was an amazing way to bless our team. And this kind of came out from this time that I spent at church of there's always something deeper going on. My rule of thumb is, I've seen it play out a number of times, is that 5 to 10% of your team at any given time are going through some major life crisis. 5 to 10%. And so just do that math, and how many are taking advantage of the EAP? Right? So I would encourage you to really think through this of how can you support, as a believer, if you're trying to live this out, how can you support and give people some handholds? All right, and then cultivate wisdom, humility. I mentioned humility earlier. Wisdom, modesty. This is just something that is, fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about being a steward. And so my return to Disher, I'll quick fly through this. I was asked to come back to apply for the role I'm in now of president. Amazing blessing. So I've been in that role since 2021, and I get to do great things like this, lead our team, and lead from this steward mindset. So I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit. So everybody doing good? Everybody good? Tracking with me? All right. I got a thumbs up in the back. That's great. Okay, steward. So what is a steward? And this is the mindset and maybe just the taste test that I want to give you today of what I'm trying to live into as a leader. So a steward, 100 years ago, if I said the word steward, and it's, we still have the word steward, but 100 years ago, if I said the word steward, everyone in this room would know exactly what I meant. And it had a few different iterations over the years, but a steward was somebody that would take care of, would lead what they don't own, okay? Would lead what they don't own. So they would take care of, typically, this is what a steward was. It was somebody, you can see there's a dining car here on an old train. Maybe this is in England, or maybe it would be 100 years ago in America. This is somebody that would take care along the way. Take care along the way. They would take care, they were entrusted with, maybe it was bagged, but really it was entrusted with people that were along the journey, and they were managing those assets, taking care of them, and making a great experience, okay? Similar would be like a manager or an overseer. Another way that this lived out was a steward of a farm, or like a tenant farm, somebody who was in charge of protecting and growing the assets. So really, to put a definition on it, it was an overseer entrusted with the care, administration, and oftentimes the profitability of another person's property, estate, or enterprise. So their core duty was to ensure that resources, and in this way it was the train, making sure things were on time, making sure people's bags were taken care of in that iteration. But really, the core duty was to ensure that resources, land, labor, finances, goods were used efficiently, honestly, and productively, on behalf of the owner or the master. Okay? So that's what it was. So I know CBRT has this, one of the core values of servant leadership. This is the way that I think about it. Steward leadership's a little bit broader. Okay? Steward leadership's a little bit broader. There's different uses and priorities for saying, in my mind, servant leadership versus steward leadership. Okay? Are you taking and leading what you don't own? Are you leading what you don't own? Are you protecting the assets in your care and multiplying them? Ooh, there we go. And we all know this. We all know this story. I won't go into it, but if you haven't read it, the story of the parable of the talents. This is him digging it in the ground while the rest of them are investing it, right? And Jesus had some very strong words about the person that dug it in the ground. But this idea is servant leadership of resources plus the accountability to owners. Leading what you don't own. So again, steward is responsible for administering, managing, and growing assets, often not their own assets, wisely, humbly, and with a larger purpose in mind. So, steward leadership, if you want to read more, again, I'm just going to give you a taste test of this. This is not only my own idea. There's two great, you can Google it, they're great. There's one that's a book, one that's a little bit more of an academic paper, but it's inspired by these writings of a guy named Kent Wilson, who did some academic study on this, and then R. Scott Rodin. If you just search those names and steward leadership, you'll get more detail on this. But they give kind of these big ideas of what it means to lead in this way as a steward. So first you have to identify as a steward, like duh. Do you see yourself this way? What's your purpose? Do you see yourself as a steward? And then understanding the owner. Understanding what are the aims of the owner. So if you're in a business that you own, this would be, what is the Lord asking of me, of this business? Why am I entrusted with this? Because ultimately I don't own it. You're not taking it to the grave with you. You're going to hand it off to somebody else, God willing, one day. Whether that's through a sale, whether that's through succession, whatever that might be. So understanding that, if you don't own a business, understanding, first off, what the Lord is asking of you, but second off, what's the owner want? What's the owner want? So understanding ownership, understanding the owner and accountability. And then this is the big one, and we'll spend kind of the rest of our time on this, is protecting and growing the resources and assets. Protecting and growing the resources and the assets on behalf of the owner, okay? This is a little bit of my own making, but I was trying to think of a great way to talk about capital, okay? To talk about capital. And there's a great book, Building a Discipling Culture. Anybody ever read this book, Building a Discipling Culture? You like it? Thumbs up. I'm getting a lot of thumbs up. I'll take it. Building a Discipling Culture, it's a little dated now, but there's still so many great ideas in here. And in there, he talks about a few different types, and the word he uses is capitals. Capitals. And so he has 5 of them. I have 6 of them here. Financial capital, this is the one that we're all familiar with. Physical capital, influential capital, relational, cultural, intellectual. Are you protecting and growing these assets? Are you protecting and growing these capitals? So I'd like to talk through here just really quickly. I'm gonna kind of fly through these. Again, a taste test. Hopefully you'll read up more on this, but what do all these capitals mean? Because if you're going to be a steward, you have to know what's entrusted into your care, and you have to know how can you grow them. How can you grow them? What does the owner want? How can you protect and grow them? So financial. We're all very familiar with this one. I probably don't need to talk super deeply on this, but this is cash flow, profit and loss statements, balance sheets, expenditures. You know, if it's very easy to measure. That's why we talk about it all the time. It's very, very easy to measure. Are our cash flows up? Is our balance sheet up? What's our profit and loss this month? Very easy to measure, and we spend in our business an inordinate amount of time talking about it, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. But you have to understand that it's easy to measure, but it's not the only measure. Easy to measure, it's not the only measure. You know, and the questions that you should ask yourself are we sacrificing, are we putting our money to work in ways that align to our mission and values? That's a different way to look at the financial capital part of it, okay? Next one, physical capital. Another one that's easy to define. We have machines, we have manufacturing plants, we have buildings, we have time, facilities, equipment, our physical environment. You can rebuild financial capital, but I would put also like time in here. You can't really get back wasted time or things that are not taken care of. So how are we in our physical environment? The question I would ask is our physical environment helping or hindering our productivity and our morale? It's an interesting question. How are we stewarding our physical assets, our physical capital? Next one, influential capital. This is your brand, your reputation, your position, your communication in the marketplace. That's that trust or value. Again, they're getting fuzzier. They're getting fuzzier, okay? But the Lord has entrusted you with this, because influence compounds together. So when you think of a brand, you could probably think of, and I won't name any, but you could probably think of a brand that you trust. And everyone has their own brands that they trust and the reasons why. When you think about a brand that you trust, that's influential capital. That's a brand, a feel of a place. And so the question I would ask here is, this is something I ask myself all the time, are we using that influence to serve ourselves, or are we using it to advance our mission as an organization? Are we serving ourselves with that influential capital or advancing the mission? It's the reason I do things like this, because I really believe in our mission to make a positive difference, that this, even just sharing some of this, even if it's just a taste test, sharing it is going to fulfill that mission of making a positive difference. All right, I'm going to keep going. A few more here. Relational capital. This is the people focus, the customers that you have, your vendors. When you think about the relational capital that a business or an organization has, it's pretty significant of how you're connected to the community, how you're connected to your suppliers, how you're connected to your customers. A good question to ask here is, are we actually helping to make our vendors, our customers better? So one example that I have of this is we get the privilege of working within lots of organizations, and a question I ask ourselves when we're doing a lessons learned on a project is, was the customer or was the team better off because we were there? So when you think about your next client interaction, your next customer interaction, was that person better off demonstrably, materially, influentially, relationally? Were they better off because you were there? All right, cultural capital, yeah, very, very similar. I mean, thinking through the collective beliefs and behaviors of your own culture. These are your shared values, your behaviors, your norms. It's kind of the way you do things. So is your organization, the question I would ask is, what stories do we tell that define our own culture, our own cultural capital? What are the stories we're telling? What are the things that we're valuing? Are you protecting it? And are you growing it as a good steward? All right, last one, intellectual capital. This is the knowledge, the ideas, the creativity. When you think through your people, you know the people that have this intellectual capital. They're the intellectual kind of center of the technical things that you do. And I don't just mean engineering-wise. Like, what's the differentiator of your business or your organization? And who has that intellectual capital? How's it being blessed? How's it being grown? How's it being protected? So a question that you might ask here is, how are we transferring that knowledge so it doesn't walk out the door when somebody retires? That's a protection of that intellectual capital, right? It's not just property, it's intellectual capital. How are we growing it? How are we blessing? Because the Lord has blessed people with intellectual capital as well. So I know that was fast, but I think it's really helpful to think through what it means to be able to protect and grow all of those different capitals, and then ultimately the goal is to give it back for a greater purpose. And that's steward leadership. That's what it means to give it back, leading what you don't own, protecting and growing those resources, the assets, the capitals, leading what you don't own, and then leveraging them to create an even greater impact. So, summary slide there, identify as a steward, understanding ownership, the owner, and accountability, protect and grow those assets and give it back for a greater purpose. So I want to end on this idea also of leading what you don't own, because Disher is an ESOP, so in some ways I very much own the business, but I'm not the founder, majority owner. I have a bunch of folks that I work and co-labor side by side with, and so this is a very real thing for me, to lead what I don't own, because ultimately it's the Lord. The earth is the Lord and the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And so as we think through this journey I mentioned of these lessons along the way and leading what you don't own, this stewardship, I think one thing that really personally in my own personal testimony that overshadows all of it is being a friend in my own identity, is being a friend, a coworker, and an adopted son of the King himself. And it's living in and bringing about his kingdom today. Because if you're a believer, and I'm gonna invite you, if you're not, JR rather is later. If you're a believer, you're living in the eternal now. And we have a temporal death in front of us, unless the Lord decides to return, which I'm always like, that would be great. For some days, that would be really great if you could do that, Lord. We're living and bringing about his kingdom now. And when I think of business owners in the room, organizational leaders in the room, we're all leaders, and we're all steward leaders, I hope. You're bringing about more of that kingdom today. You have the opportunity to say yes to that or to say no to it. Are you living in his kingdom today? And so my own story, the question was the role of God in my business success and the faith impact. And here's what I wrote down. I wrote down the role of God, he's been simply everything, because sometimes I'm not successful. So it's really nice to assume all of this business success, but my own personal testimony, my own story is a story of renewal and redemption. It's a story of continual renewal. And it's what I wrote here, living and bringing about his kingdom with the skills and gifts that he's given me. So, my own come to faith story. I was, when you see this family up here that we're very, very happy. We're very close knit as a family. I didn't have that as much growing up. So when I was 12 years old, I'm the youngest of three. So I wasn't kidding. I have a brother named John, and my older sister. And when I was 12 years old, my parents went through a divorce. It was a really hard divorce as well. And so I found myself 12 years old, kind of known by a lot of people, but very lonely. And my sons are right around that age. All right, yeah. They're right around that age. And so it's a interesting time as a dad for me personally too, to know how tender I was at that age, and to know that the Lord saw that he wasn't apart from that. He was actually there with me. And so when I was 12 years old, my brother went to live with my dad, and he was a sophomore, junior in high school. My sister was at college, and so she was a little bit apart from it, and I went to live with my mom. So it was, I had this realization, it was a broken home. And yeah, it was lonely. But the Lord saw that. And, we had gone to church. We would connect with believers from time to time, for sure. It was, I knew of the Lord, but I didn't know the Lord. Some of you know that. And so I was reading my Bible alone one night in our apartment that my mom and I lived at. We had a nice, house that we moved out of, lived in an apartment kind of in town, and I was reading my Bible, and it was a children's Bible. It was like the New Adventure children's Bible. And I was reading it, and the Lord showed up. I don't know how else to describe it, but reading the gospel and understanding my standing before him of sin and of separateness and of ultimately death, and being 12 years old, that first, in my opinion, that first time that you can really cognitively get more of that. And he showed up. And he invited me, wherever your theological persuasion, he saved me, or I said yes, whatever it is, he invited me into a new life with him, and I give him the glory and the praise for that. And so here's my charge. One thing why I think that words matter, and why reading matters, and why Scripture is alive and active, is that he saved me not through something like this. He saved me through his own Scriptures and through his actual words. And so I encourage you, my charge would be, if you've never read the Bible from beginning to end, do it. If you've never read the Gospels from beginning to end, do it. It's alive and active, and that's how the Lord chose to save me, not through a friend or a mentor or a youth group leader. That's how he chose to save me, was through his Scriptures and through that one-on-one connection. And so through there, I mentioned it a little bit. I know I'm running a little short on time here, but I remember reading the Bible, that power of Scripture, understanding that I'm a sinner saved by grace. And then my wife, Stephanie, came into my life shortly after that. And it's not been without challenges for sure, and difficulty and hardship and loss and grief. But the Lord is there, and the Lord has led me through that. And so I was involved in, just fast forward a little bit, I've never felt like I fit into some of the normal things. Like if the Lord saved me from, reading his Scriptures, that's not in a weird way, that's not like a typical way. A lot of kids, my age at that time would be involved in youth group. I was never involved in youth group. Got involved in some other ministries at college. So I was involved with Campus Crusade here at Western, helped start the reimagination of that. And then I mentioned earlier the Bridge. So the Lord has just called me into these kind of unique spaces in my life and faith. And even this, leading in this way, is just a blessing and a unique challenge that he's asking me to be faithful with what he's stewarded. He's asking me to steward well what he's given me. So last slide here. On my first day at Disher, I was reading My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers. And this is my first day in 2012, 2013. And it was just so perfect. And so this sits under my computer screen on a handwritten note. It says, we have no right to judge where we should be put or to have preconceived notions as to what God is fitting us for. God engineers everything. Oh, I love that, my engineers in the room. I love that. God engineers everything. Wherever he puts us, our one great aim is to pour out a wholehearted devotion to him in that particular work. So whatever you're doing today, I would ask you to be a good steward of it, to seek the Lord, to understand the Lord because he owns all of it, and to put it to good use in wholehearted devotion to that particular work. Yeah, thank you very much.